Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lou. I'm going to keep this informal. We're going to try to address some questions and emails today in this rather tumultuous society in which we live. Something I think that is worth discussing just very briefly to give you a little bit of entertainment. Apparently, the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams, decided to erect a tent up in the district of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Right, Congresswoman from New York, rather outspoken little devil, highly intelligent, well-educated. Interestingly enough, he got a whole lot of pushback from her. And so now the master plan, if you're ready for this one, is to relocate it to a place called Randall's Island. There's only one problem with Randall's Island. There's only one bus that gets there, and you have to catch it on 126th Street and Lexington Avenue, which can be a rather, I would say, interesting place to navigate. It's part of Harlem. So I'm just wondering, once we get them on Randall's Island, I guess they're going to take the bus to and from 126th and Lex and navigate the rest of the city. I don't know what the master plan is. You know, I'm trying to figure out, now that we've come to learn, courtesy of Homeland Security, that the United States government, independent of notifying any governors or mayors or any elected officials or law enforcement officials, what are we doing with 1.7 million people you've dispersed across the country and continue to do so? We dropped 50 people in Martha's Vineyard. We have the deployment of the National Guard. You look at the borders, no one. The National Guard's only there because of Abbott. Right? We're just stepping all over ourselves and we can't seem to get out of our way. But the worst part about this conversation is it doesn't change from day to day. It's the same disturbing topics, the same disturbing questions. You know, at some point, we've got to start to embrace this notion of problem solving. So long story short, we're now going to put them in tents in Randall's Island, which, by the way, is the fire academy for the New York City Fire Department, and I don't know what this is about, guys. I can only imagine that at some point, if the conservative element, the Republicans, gain control of this House and this Senate, you're likely to see impeachment of, among others, Alejandro Mayorkas, Homeland Security head, not doing much as far as addressing the borders, stating the borders are broken and not broken. We can't figure out. We need a scorecard at this point to keep track of the players here. I also think a very close look needs to be given to Garland, the Attorney General, primarily because of their remissful approach to protecting our United States Supreme Court justices during some rather unpopular rulings with the left. So, in any event, life goes on, and I think at some point in time we need to sit down, put our differences aside, and try to figure out how we can come to some form of a reasonable resolution, whether it's the borders or the crime in our cities, how we get our cities back. And, interestingly enough, if anyone would like to have a sit down with me, I could explain to them how to go about this, because these are fixable problems. These are problems that are the byproducts of making mistakes for generations and maybe centuries. But it's not too late to get the genie back in the bottle. We just seem to enjoy, allowing these problems to fester day in and day out. And unfortunately, it comes at the expense of our young people in the future, of them and this country. So without further ado, we're going to get on with the show, as they would say, and we're going to talk about these topics. I do want to just talk about the electric issue also, by the way, just one quick moment. If you're in California, there are there's power shortages. There's not enough generational electricity to supply to meet the demand in California. I know this because I've had a home out there since '89. They don't want to build nuclear reactors. I don't blame them. geologically, the state can be a little unsettled. It has fault lines. They have one, Diablo Canyon. Maybe it would help you if you went to the bordering state like Nevada and Arizona, sat down with their governors and collaborated, maybe under the auspices of the federal government, started building reactors out in these rather desolate areas that we call deserts that are geologically sound, and start to power the whole West Coast. But why would we want to do that? Because that makes sense. That's right. We're against nuclear power. Let me break everyone's heart and tell you the following. All of the steam turbines that generate electricity are fueled first and foremost by fossil fuel and then nuclear power. So you got to get in the real world. And when you continue to grow the population of this country, and the state of California, for example, did you never consider you might have to get them power and water and build an infrastructure, which they lack also? I always use this expression, the cuckoo has left the clock. In reference to Florida, the poor people in the southwest part of Florida, this is just a wake-up call, folks, as to exactly what nature is about and how unbridled it can be. I've had the good fortune of working as a lifeguard on a beach up in New York on the Atlantic, and I've seen and experienced the power of the ocean. Oh, by the way, if you have an electric car, you can't power it. Although I will say one thing, this governor, boy, he's got an A game. He had all the assets in place to go back, and the power's up from after over 2.5 million people to only about 400,000. They're operating without power. But if you have an electric car, it's a bit problematic. So, in any case, we go on with the show. I want to take a quick break, and we're going to come back. And I think, based on the direction of the producer, Mr. Molander, we will get into caller or email. I do want to just mention Buzzsprout and Instacart, who are sponsors. I will just tell you, don't take me on my word. Go find out for yourself. This podcast and many podcasts are built off that platform. Buzzsprout and Instacart just works exactly as simply they state. You contact them via the phone you're on or computer, and you order commodities, and they have them delivered to your house from your grocery store. It works. And there are some special offers that they've set aside, we've set aside for you. So please look into them, and I want to remind you that you need to be part of this conversation, because the exercise is to try to take the country in a direction different than the one it is going. You can contact us at betweenthelines.tv, email us, call us, send a pigeon with a note, do something. So we'll be right back, guys, and then we're going to go to our first caller, Tim, who is in San Diego. We'll be right back. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. Is this Tim?
It is, yes, sir.
Thanks for calling in, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Where are you hanging these days?
I'm stationed out here in San Diego right now.
Not bad. I understand from one of the producers on the show you were attached to a SEAL team, or are you still currently, or you were?
Yes, sir, I am. I'm attached to basically all the SEAL teams on the West Coast right now. I was attached to SEAL Team 5 for about 2 years, did everything with them. Now I'm back at the headquarters working out with all the teams. Yeah,
you're living one of these cutting-edge lives, I had something similar to that, but attached to law enforcement and the private security sector. So I further understand that you're a weapons expert. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you and I should have a conversation off air.
That's great. That sounds great. My dad was, he's still a police officer today. He's about 40 years in the force as well, down in around Dallas area.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dallas, good city. Been there a number of times. Texas is a good state. Are you born and raised in Dallas, Tim? Oh,
I
Texas?
am, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hurst, okay. Texas is where I was born and raised. So it's about, a suburb inside Dallas, Fort Worth area.
How many years have you been attached to the Navy?
I'm actually about to celebrate my 12th anniversary in about a week.
Good for you. So you're a career man, huh?
So far, we'll see. It's taking care of my family. I got 3 little boys and a wife, so I just have the 3-month-old right now too. So
here's one for you. Would you encourage your children to follow in your footsteps?
That's tough. I don't think so. I never really grew up wanting to be in the military, but it does take care. It builds character. You can build a beautiful family, and stepping stone to basically anything you want to do in life.
Yeah, so you've been in 12 years. Obviously, you've been deployed overseas, I suspect.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have some interesting stories. Anything in particular on your mind today, Tim?
Yes, sir. So basically, San Diego, I don't have to really, repeat myself on how, inflation and how expensive it is right now to live in California. I know you lived in California a number of years, correct?
I beg your pardon?
Did you live in California?
Oh, yeah. And let me just give you a little backstory, Tim. I started visiting California around 1971 on a spring break when I was in college in New York.
Okay.
And I fell in love with California, period. I mean, it was just a whole different place than what you're experiencing right now. It was like the land of milk and honey. It was really just quite incredible. And I went every year for my vacation. 1973, I went in the police department. We used to get 27 paid working days, which I took all in one hit. With your RDOs, your regular days off, I was out there for 2 months. There's no state like the state of California. And there's a lot of beautiful states here, I mean, without question. But there's something about California, cumulative product of the weather. The people are very nice, even though my producer, who's from there, he's not. If you talk to this guy, stay away from him, Tim. Just trust me, buddy. Trust me. In any case, there's a lot of attributes there. It's been mismanaged, and you're starting to allude to it right now. So I moved out there in '89, and I'm in the private security sector. I ran the Academy Awards. I ran the Golden Globes. I worked for a lot of people in the entertainment industry on the West Coast, and I have a very strong attachment to the place. I'd be living there right now, except for what you just brought up. What it costs to live there. You can't afford to live there, work there, own a business there. And it's just grossly mismanaged. And I'd love for Gavin Newsom to come onto the show so we could have a little bit of a civil exchange. And I just want to ask him some really interesting, simple questions that have solutions attached. So now that you heard a little bit of my backstory, Tim, go on.
Yeah, I would 100% love to hear that conversation with him as well on your show. So basically, the military knows, we don't get paid that much. I'm in military housing, which at the time was great, moving here, kids, animals, no utilities. I just lose all my BAH, which is about $2,900. You're not going to find a house for $2,900 out here. Basically this last month, actually about a week ago, they implemented immediately $900, extra pay for housing, basically for relief for each family in the military out here in San Diego. Well, it comes in a form of your BAH, which is your basic housing allowance. So in mine and a lot of other people, junior sailors as well, in their case, that $900 is eaten by Liberty Military Housing. Basically, now we're paying $3,900 instead of $2,900 or $3,800. And I think somebody actually took numbers the other day, and all the housing, and it's about $500,000 for the next 3 months. Per month that they're making extra, taking the relief money that the Navy gave us and adding it into our rent. So it's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's an interesting critique of the country. Tim, this goes back to a constant observation I make. I try not to use the word criticism. I'll use the word observation. We seem to have this propensity to take care of everyone but our own. I would say this to you, Tim. If I were the president of this country or the governor of the state of California or attached to the military with any level of influence, our military in particular would be paid considerably more. And those who are in specialized areas like yourself, like these special forces units, even more above that because of the risk you take and the level of commitment. But, unfortunately, there's a lot of things in the country today, Tim, that just don't make sense. I mean, you're just speaking to one of them right now. Mm-hmm. If you look at the borders, they're out of control. You're Texan by background. Texas is just rocking and rolling at that border.
Yeah.
Your major cities you can't visit, your foreign policy, I'm sure you have some insight on this travesty in Afghanistan with this withdrawal, leaving all these women and young girls out to dry, and then this economy, which we're speaking to directly. You just wonder how misguided people can be. And what's so interesting for you is you come from such a base of discipline and structure and clarity in thinking, because if you're not thinking that way, you end up dying. These
right.
people operate with reckless abandonment, Tim, and they're flushing us all down the toilet. I do want to ask you, do your children go to school on base?
No, they do not. So I don't
Were they born in San Diego?
So I have two were born in San Diego. One was born in San Antonio.
Interesting.
So.
And your wife is a Texan, or where's she from?
She was born and raised in Mexico.
Okay.
She moved to Texas in 2001. Well, she moved to LA, and then they flew into, basically, long story short, they arrived in Texas and grew up in Texas since 2001, 2002. I went ahead and she got citizenship here in, let's see.
You mean she didn't swim the Rio Grande?
Pretty close. But
listen, Tim, an idea for you. You and I are going to meet in Mexico, and we're going to start giving swim lessons. You hear me?
Yeah.
I do want to ask you this question. I hope that your wife has taught your children to speak fluent Spanish, and you, by the way, while she was at it. Has she done that?
So my son is in first grade. He's actually in a Spanish, half English throughout the day. So it is pretty cool and she does speak fluent to my kids. I took a number of years in high school. I can understand most of it. I don't really speak it, but whenever we do go home once a year for family and stuff, we stay with her mom and everything, her mom and sister, and they just speak fluent, so I'm sitting on the couch with the kids and they're just in the, gossiping at the kitchen table.
Yeah. That's a good thing though. The thing I would say to you, Tim, if I could just give you some advice, is that you're in 12 years in the military. I would kind of stick it out, you know what I'm saying, as far as that goes. And, because this is not a time, although I have to say this to you, there's a lot of jobs in the workplace right now, but none that I believe are appropriate for you. I've always commented on the government and their failure to assimilate everyone who had been in special forces units into our society, and in particular into our law enforcement community. I don't know why, like when you detach, they give you a DD-214, the government doesn't approach you and say, hey, Tim, you know what? You'll take a month or two off, reacclimate to civilian life, and then we want to kind of take all those skill sets you've developed and use them judiciously, I might note, because your mission statement's much different than ours in law enforcement, and make you part of the law enforcement community. The federal government has this tendency to want college-educated people, and if you don't navigate this culture today with a college education, it prevents you from getting a lot of jobs in the military, FBI, CIA, Secret Service, ATF, DEA. There's loads of them. They should give you a waiver. You know what I mean? That's what I would do. I have to be honest with you. I'm surprised Trump didn't do something like that, because he loves law enforcement and he loves the military. But there has to be something at the end of the rainbow for you guys, and it annoys the living hell out of me that there isn't. You should be able to detach right now and have them assimilate you into this law enforcement community, because you have a skill set. But I do want to say one thing, Tim. We use a lot of diplomacy, people skills, and service. You guys like to neutralize people. So you got to just change the agenda a slight bit when you come to work for us, if you understand what I'm saying.
I've actually
it's a whole different mission statement, but the skill sets are very similar, and you cannot question the discipline that's attached to our military, and in particular, special forces units.
Yeah, I love that.
Anything else you want to talk about? Because we're going to have to go to a break, Tim.
Yeah, just, it's tough. I'm listening to God right now and trying to figure out, I pick orders in this month in October, figure out where I want to go, if I want to stay in. I do have a job opportunity to join the private sector, basically, in around Dallas, to be Ross Perot Jr.'s private security. I have basically into that field. So, it's kind of...
If you want some help, navigating that, you're going to have to negotiate, buddy, because I'm going to tell you this. I worked for a lot of big people, including cabinet members of the President of the United States. I worked for the Executive Office of the President. I protected a head of state over 22 years. I work for Governor Schwarzenegger. When you go to work for people like that, you need to have a whole framework of what the boundaries are, because the thing you don't want to do is end up living their life. And I want to say this to you. Normally, if you're going to take on a protectee, Tim, you need a team of individuals to do that. You follow what I'm saying? So I contact Ryan, and he'll give you my mobile number, my personal number, and then you have a conversation with me, because that's a great opportunity. But they've got to properly structure it. You know, they've got to salary you and give you a 401k, and then have an understanding that if you go beyond 40 hours based on your salary, there's additional compensation. And when you go on the road, you're in forced standby. Have Ryan give you my number, and you call me, and I'll walk you through that, because that's a good opportunity. That's a good family, and that can also lead to other things, because there's a thirst for guys like yourself. The thing, I love the guys in the military. I have an affection for the SEAL teams, because I was a water guy. I spent 15 years on the Atlantic Ocean up in New York as a lifeguard at a place called Jones Beach. I had friends of mine during my younger years that went into the SEAL teams. But have him give you my number and call me, and I'll help you structure that negotiation, because that's what it is. You know, they may throw a $125,000 salary at you, right? But if you find out you're working 80 hours a week and you're going on the road for 2 weeks at a time when needed, you got to start to divide the hours into the money. You don't want to be working for $15 an hour, Tim. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Please take me up on that offer, and I'll help you, walk you through that. And I also know people in the industry. So, Tim, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come right back to you, and then I want to give you the floor again to discuss some other things that might be of interest to you. This is Between the Lines. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Actually, I have to go into work.
Okay.
But thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been an honor to have you on the phone. I respect you and what you're doing, and take me up on the offer. And listen.
Absolutely.
Leave no stone unturned, Tim. Look at this Ross Perot things, because there are other things out there also. And I have friends that own security companies that utilize backgrounds like yours. I'm just telling you I do, so I can direct you to some people. Okay, guys, going to take a quick break. Tim, good luck to you and your family. Stay safe. And we're going to be right back, guys. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. And before we go on to the next caller, Derek from Georgia, I want to just go back to this conversation about Florida and the efforts that are being made there by emergency services and volunteers. You would be shocked and overwhelmed to see how many people have stepped up to the plate and insinuated himself into this episode to help people, to rescue people. As you're probably aware, I believe the death toll is about 104 right now. Interestingly enough, they arrested 4 individuals who were attempting to loot and commit burglary. I have my own way of dealing with that. Probably most people wouldn't like it, but you know, you have to send out a message that just resonates and acts as the ultimate deterrent. You know, when you engage in this type of activity during a natural disaster, they might consider just terminating you. And I'm not kidding you when I say that. I don't know what you're thinking about when you prey on people who are at the bottom of the bottom, and your best thought is to go in there and further unravel their lives. You know, as far as this response, it's just, I've never seen a response this effective in my life. Honestly, and I've been around a lot. I've been in this community over 49 years, and I know some heavy hitters, and I was in New York City. I mean, I was there for the World Trade Center. Another unbelievable response. This was rather unique because of the nature of the storm, you know, difficult just to get there. But this governor, DeSantis, he had all types of assets in place, air, land, sea. You know, he had everything staged on the perimeter of this episode so he could insert them, unlike Katrina, where nobody was really prepared for this. And fortunately, you know, there was a rumor that a levee or a dam was going to break down in that area, and it didn't. That's what killed Katrina, New Orleans, by the way. That dam broke. I think it was Pontchartrain, or there was a body of water there, a lake, and it just flooded. It wasn't the hurricane, because what they're saying is that this hurricane was more intense than Katrina was. And I'll tell you right now, if you take a look at the pictures of Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel Island and some other areas, there's still massive amounts of water, and it's unrecognizable. But guys, sit up and take notice. This is Mother Nature. There is no way you're going to outpower or overpower, what nature in the ocean can do. It's just, I can't explain it to you. It's just, it's almost unnerving to a point. So, our producer has a question. He's asking about the killing by a policeman of a person threatening a police dog. Please allow me to inform you of the following. Those dogs that are assigned to those police officers are members of that agency, and threatening that dog is the same as threatening the life of a human being. That's the way they look at it. These dogs, there's a lot of investment that goes into them, an immense amount of training, not just verbal commands, but through sign. I learned a lot about them, and I'm not a dog guy. I happen to be a little fearful of them. Those and horses, I stay in my lane. But, you point a gun at the head of a dog that's attached to the police department, you could end up on the wrong end of that gun yourself, and that's exactly what happened. You would hope that there would have been an option, but if you see the video, the gun was right at the head of the dog, and the police officer had no choice. And they hold these dogs in the highest esteem, the same way they do with their mounted units. So, not surprised. I don't think that person anticipated that. And the other thing I considered was maybe this was a suicide by cop. By doing that, maybe he knew that would trigger the police officer to terminate him, which is unfortunately what happened. So I'm going to move on now. Derek from Georgia is asking me, Donald Trump is suing CNN, claiming defamation and seeking punitive damages of $475 million. He claims they smeared him with defamatory labels as racist, Russian, lackey, and Hitler. Trump claims that they ramped up its attacks in recent months because the network feared that he would run for president again in 2024. Does this lawsuit have any merit? And will CNN back off attacking him? There is no question that the media, not just CNN, has improperly portrayed him. They've depicted him in a less than accurate way. There is something in the law regarding public figures. You do not have the same legal recourse in suing people for defamation, number one. Number two, Trump would have to prove damages. You can throw $475 million out there, but the former president would have to establish what the damages were, how it impacted his livelihood. I'm surprised he's not suing him for intentional infliction of emotional distress, to be very candid with you, because that's certainly something that should be considered. Unfortunately, this is just symptomatic of a much bigger problem. The media is really not concerned about being unbiased. They've decided to take on the political mantle of their favorite political party, and that's a big part of what's wrong in the country today. The messaging is all wrong. The credibility in the media is all but evaporated, and along with a lot of our elected officials. Excuse me. I don't know if the case will go forward. I think maybe he's trying to make a point. The really tragic discussion attached to CNN was that back in the 90s in particular, when I started working for this company, Turner Broadcasting and CNN in 1996, it was the benchmark for responsible news reporting. It really was. And then suddenly a political entity got control of it. I'm not going to throw names around. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And the agenda of that network changed. It became more in alignment with MSNBC. What's interesting about both of these networks, for example, is that there is little or no coverage as to what's going on at the border. And the border is being saturated by Fox. And so much so, and I know this is a little bit of a tangent, I'm going to go back to the Trump discussion in a second, that the federal government is expressing concerns about one young man, Fallujah, I think the young guy's name is, who's just hammering at them with the facts and the truth attached to what's going on at the southern border. As far as Mr. Trump goes, these are media outlets. They're supposed to be truthful and unbiased, and clearly they have not been. But as I mentioned to you before, the motivation behind these attacks might be something as simple as being fearful of him running again. Because, I tell you a thing about human nature. This is really interesting. When you go through life, you'll meet people that, You have such a disdain for them that no matter how much they have that you need, you don't want it, you won't take it. You just want to discard them. We saw that in 2020. People were just tired of the lack of reverence, the lack of demeanor and decorum demonstrated by Donald Trump. He has to take responsibility. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm not telling you I'm anti-Trump, pro-Trump. Sorry, folks, not going down that road. But he's got to take responsibility. Well, along comes the 2020 election. And from the time Joe Biden has gotten into office, your price of gasoline has gone through the roof. Your cost of living is at an all-time high over 40 or 50 years. We had a disgraceful, deplorable withdrawal from Afghanistan. Your borders have gone to hell in a handbasket to where they estimate about 4.5 million people have crossed into this country illegally. 900,000 of those gotaways, individuals that had no encounter with our Border Patrol or immigration, went undetected. Not undetected, unengaged. There's a different discussion there. Your major cities don't know what to say to you. You know, so people are now going like this. We don't care what a lunatic Trump is. Just put him back in office so we can get gas back in alignment, get the cost of commodities and supermarkets lowered, bring this border back into some sensible structure that we're not stopping migration, but we're allowing it to take place at a level that we can vet. No one's being vetted there. And our foreign policies. What people don't know about Trump and Afghanistan is the following. If you listen to the generals, not Trump, Trump kind of told them this. We're going to pull out of Afghanistan. And we're going to make an agreement. You deviate from what we agree, I know where you live. And believe me, Donald Trump would follow through. Period. End of discussion. So the media is concerned about him. They hear his footsteps. The reason you're hearing about Ron DeSantis all the time now is because they hear his footsteps. And to be very candid with you, not to get into a whole political dissertation here, but there's a generation of elected officials or people that call them low self-leadership, which is almost like an oxymoron because they're not. Trump, Clinton, McConnell, Schumer, Nadler, Adam Schiff, there's a whole generation of them, both sides of the aisle, that are toxic. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because they're so demographically down the road that they don't understand the implication of their lack of responsibility. Right? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're just too damn old. Maybe it's time to pass the torch. Listen, folks, I had a life. When you're in law enforcement and you can run, jump, and skip, eventually there's a day you can't do it. You need to pass the torch. I worked as a lifeguard. There was no job as exhilarating like that, playing in the ocean and hurricane surf and saving people's lives. You have windows in your life. They open and they close. A lot of these people, their window is closed. Dianne Feinstein is 87 years old. And it's being reported consistently that her faculties are all but gone, but she just won't let go. Nancy Pelosi's 83. Let it go. Biden is pushing 80. Let it go. Trump, too. I'm not taking any prisoners here. I'm telling you the truth because it's about what's in the best interest of our young people. Their agenda is not consistent with what's in the best interest of our young people. We need to bring back some credibility and truth to this system. We've sucked the integrity and the truth completely out of it. And I go back to you again with the media. Here we go again, CNN, right? You have a responsibility. Where's the oversight with them? You know, if they say something about Donald Trump that's just completely fabricated, which has happened, I might note, they latch on to any song or dance that lends itself to demeaning this man or ridiculing him. I know you don't like him, but that's not an excuse to piss caution to the wind in your reporting. You look at one episode after the other. They went after him with Russian collusion. You know, we got this crossfire hurricane investigation, only to find out it was a bust. We spent an enormous amount of money of the taxpayers and distracted this country from things going on that were critically important, like our foreign policy. That, by the way, whether you like Trump or not, he did some good things. At the same time, he addressed an issue of manufacturing being brought back into the country. He did some good things. That doesn't license CNN to malign him because, you know, he didn't exactly walk and talk the way they should have. I kid around going, we didn't send him to finishing school. I want to tell CNN this thing. 2 wrongs never make a right. Things that Donald Trump did and said at times were inappropriate. The things you're doing right now, they say, never become that which you despise. And that's what we have going on in the media. This thing with the borders is just confounding. You can't get a clip of it from CNN or MSNBC as to the gravity of this problem. But if you dump 50 people In Martha's Vineyard, we got film coverage. You put them in New York City, we got stories on top of stories. What Abbott and DeSantis were doing and are doing is bringing to light the scope of this problem. They sat there for over a year and contained this, which, by the way, at the same time, the government dispersed 1.7 million people, according to Homeland Security, who illegally breached our borders. In the middle of the night, they dropped them in Westchester, in Jacksonville, Florida, in Nashville, Tennessee, in Phoenix, Arizona. Irrefutable. I'm not telling you this is a politician. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an American. And more importantly, I'm a father. And to all of you that are out there that have children, start thinking about your children when you go to vote. And please go out and vote. This is our defining moment next month, November 8th. Whether this country goes on in a positive fashion or it doesn't. And I've looked at what's taken place in this administration in 19 months or 20 months, whatever it is. And if this is the forecast of what's going to happen if they continue to control the House and the Senate, you can kiss the country goodbye. We're going to take a quick break, guys. We'll be right back. Do some emails, phones, whoever we have lined up. This Between the Lines. I encourage you to call us, betweenthelines.tv, or email it if it's more convenient for you. We'll be right back, guys. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and I have a young lady, Lisa, from Santa Clarita, asking me the following. My thoughts and prayers are with Florida after this hurricane Ian's devastation. We will now see a mass exodus from Florida, even though this was called a 100-year storm. It seems nowhere is safe anymore. Crime in the major cities, flooding in the south, droughts in the Midwest, unbearable heat out west. I would say that's fairly accurate observation, but that's just something that's always been there. This is nothing new. You just have to learn to adjust. And the thing I would say to you is that we are advised and given direction as to where we should build or not build. If you go out to California, they build in the canyons. They tell you don't build in the canyons. There isn't a sufficient amount of water in the canyons or infrastructure to support fire apparatus. I know that firsthand because I lived in Malibu and I spoke to firefighters that were fighting fires in the Malibu Canyon and Canyon Doom. They tell you don't build. They tell you don't build on the ocean. And we're just not listening. So these 100-year storms, it doesn't matter how frequent they are, they're devastating. And as long as you're prepared to roll the dice and take the risk, regardless of where you want to live, that's just the way it is. There are places to go that are geologically more stable than others. For example, the Northeast. You seldom have any of these episodes up there. The hurricanes, when they get up there, are usually dying down because the water temperature is much cooler, and we all have come to learn that the warmth of the water fuels and feeds the intensity of the winds. So when you go further north, water cools down, the hurricanes die down. There are no earthquakes up there, for the most part. It is not hot and arid as it is out west. And, interestingly enough, a lot of these problems that you just mentioned in this email question can be mitigated. There's ways to address the water. There's ways to address the energy. We just don't seem to think it's important because we're distracted and preoccupied with trying to control the country. How about you just control the state you're in? As far as Florida goes and a mass exodus, I'm not sure that's going to occur. It may very well happen. I suspect that there are areas along the Gulf of Mexico where this hurricane took place that will never be the same. I don't think people would ever rebuild them. Although I said that with Katrina in New Orleans, which is below sea level, about 6 or 8 feet, and they rebuild. And I have gentlemen in law enforcement that live in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, and I say to them, where do the poor people go after these disasters? Their response is they don't leave. It's their home. They rebuild. Maybe that's what we're going to experience here. But you just have to take notice. If it's California, you're going to have possibly excessive heat and water droughts, electricity shortages, earthquakes. If you're living in Arkansas, which is where my mom was from, or Tennessee, or any number of states, what we call Tornado Alley, you just have to know where you're living. There you can mitigate it by building subterranean. But you're still going to have your whole house decimated. This is Mother Nature, and there's no way to get around it. And I just say to you, if these things wear on you, then you should pick a place that is more geologically stable so you're less likely to have any of these occurrences. Hope that answered that question, and above all things, stay calm. Never panic. Panic gets you nothing. Any case, we're going to go to another, I believe, question from a gentleman, Paul from Eagle Rock, Texas. Last week, you and Karen spoke about the migrants on Martha's Vineyard. But what's missing from the conversation are the unaccompanied migrant children. The number is approximately 267,000 since Biden took office, and now we're here in the U.S. Where do we go? Where did they go? Who cares for them? Where are their parents? Really good questions. You know, in a much broader sense, where have all of 4 million plus people gone that have come across the border illegally? You're right, 267,000 children have been allowed to come into the country who may be just wandering around. I hope that isn't the case. I do believe organizations like Catholic Charities, for example, they take them in, they watch out for them. There are a number of mechanisms in place that will foster children. Not that this is the best thing for them, to be candid with you. It's never good when you leave your family. You know, it's a whole conversation that conditions are so bad in some of these countries in Central and South America to start with, that they would allow their children to come here without them so they have a shot at life. That's a really interesting concept to wrap your arms around. But as far as who's caring for them, I hope we are, you know, especially if they're children. You know, I have a safe place and a special place in my heart for children and young people in general. So we need to kind of transition right now into a little bit of a discussion with the Ukraine. And next week I would encourage you to listen, because I'm going to have a gentleman by the name of Elliot Ackerman. Google him. It'll tell you the rest without me speaking much further about him. But this is going to be an interesting podcast next week. You know, we're still hearing the saber rattling and discussions about this nuclear threat and the annexation that Putin has spoken to. One thing I do want to remind everyone is that Europe was cautioned by people, among others Donald Trump, not to get involved with Russia because of their reliability, and now they're experiencing it. Could have an interesting winter to start with this conversation. In reference to this nuclear threat, the thing I'm going to tell you about this man is that he is not going to leave that country in disgrace. I think the exercise right now is to try to figure out how to allow him to save face. That's really it in a nutshell. If you're asking me, is he capable of deploying a tactical nuclear device? My assessment of him, based on what I understand of him, reading, speaking to people in the intelligence community, yes, yep. He's not going to leave there with his head down. He's not going to be leaving there humiliated. That's not happening. And I don't think this guy really cares about his own people. What's really interesting about this conversation is when you listen to this discussion about response by our country and NATO. By the way, just to remind you, Finland and Sweden are not NATO members just yet, so there's only 27 of them. In Europe, there's a total of 30 globally. But the response is going to be, we're going to annihilate his military. I wonder if people realize that there's a whole bunch of people in his military that don't want to be there. And I hope this doesn't lend itself to like bombing their mainland, because I'll tell you something I've learned about people in traveling, especially foreign countries. The people in Iran are not necessarily aligned with the political agenda of their leadership. Same thing in Russia. We're finding out here many of our people are not politically aligned with the agenda of our elected officials and our media. We're all just people passing by, folks. Many people here are just trying to get through the day. They have families and jobs. They're considering feeding their children and housing and medicine when the kids get sick. They're not immersed in this political scene. This is a microcosm of countries that is steering the direction of these countries. Ours is no different. Question has come up, should we deport all Russians until the war is over? Well, I don't think that's the answer, guys. You know, I don't think we need to add salt in the wound. I don't think we need to engage in anything that might be an egregious injustice. I would think that our intelligence community is probably aware of anyone in this country, regardless of its origin, that might represent some form of a threat. You know, just to remind you, at the borders, we're being informed that people are breaching that southern border for, I think it's 113 or 118 countries. You know, it's not just people from Central and South America and Mexico. And Mexicans are not coming in here in numbers that people think either, just for the record, so we're clear. In fact, a lot of Mexicans are repatriating. They're going back to Mexico because the cuckoo left the clock here. As far as the end of this war, this incursion, I just think at some point they should try to reach out and engage in some compromise. Maybe it's the relinquishing of certain land masses that are bordering Russia, a very small concession, although that can be construed as selling out the people that are living there. It's a tough one, but I do think, the one thing you have to demonstrate right now is strength and resolve. And maybe this isn't going to have a happy ending, ladies and gentlemen. That's a possible likelihood. But the only way to back him down, and I tell this to people all the time, when people act crazy and threatening, you sometimes need to introduce them as to what exactly threatening and crazy can really be like. Maybe this government and the governments across this planet need to sit there and go, don't go down this road, because the response from all of us will basically lend itself to your annihilation in totality. There's another question also about, people that may be out trying to neutralize him. I wouldn't doubt that for 1 second. It went on with Hitler, who had a similar mentality to this man. And I suspect it's going on with Putin, which is why you can't get near him. Interesting tag onto this thing is China. I'm sure China's watching this and realizing this may have been a little ill-conceived. And this may be why they have not gone into Taiwan. I don't think China at the end of the day wants to upset their apple cart any more than it already is financially. They've got a good sphere of influence in our country, which is unhealthy for us. Another discussion, folks. And I think they're learning from this mistake. For those of you who haven't followed the news, North Korea recently fired a missile over the mainland of Japan. I would say that's tantamount to an act of war in most worlds. I think the key thing is not to overreact, especially in light of the climate in which we live. What I am concerned about is that those on the outside, whether it's countries like North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, are looking at us and starting to see all of the instability here and the lack of leadership. And I don't say that to be unkind towards Joe Biden. It's just the truth. This is not John F. Kennedy, who's who we need today. And by the way, he's a Democrat. And I would tell you that's the answer to the problem today. Someone has a resounding calm and influence over people. He was just amazing what this guy was able to do. I was fortunate enough to be alive through his administration, and afterwards to study him closely and to see this man grow into this job and become a leader. He really was. And he was a leader of America, not the Democrats or the Republicans. He was the leader of this country, and everybody loved this man. Maybe that's why we whacked him. Maybe he got too powerful. Guys, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and maybe take a look at another email or question, or maybe I'll just discuss some things that are nagging the country. We'll be right back. Stay with me. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm just going to some closing remarks and food for thought, which is what this show is really about. I'm not trying to tell you who to vote for or spoon feed you, and I caution you not to be spoon-fed by the media outlets you're listening to today, regardless of which one. What's going on in our major cities is just troubling. The random violence, the risk you take just going out the door, whether it's New York, Chicago, Baltimore, Philly, D.C., L.A., San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. I miss a place or two? You hear what I'm saying. And there's a way to get this genie back in the bottle. And the thing people have to understand is we need to go in and convince the residents in these jurisdictions that we want to change things for them. And there's a way to do that. And this is, again, a criticism of mine of the Republican Party. They need to soften their stance and become a little more, I'd say, touchy-feely with issues that are socially related. But if you understand New York, for example, New York is a minority city now, period. End of discussion. It's the truth. Well, how about, we start to dedicate some money and some manpower into our neighborhoods that are minority-driven and indigent, and additionally reach out to their pastors and their parishes and their elected local officials and start to sit down and put our heads together and take the conversation in a different direction and convince them to vote for people that are going to protect them, because in case they haven't figured it out, it isn't the powers to be. And I'm not saying this as a Republican. I'm saying this to you as an American. It's a Democratic Party. You've been had, period, end of discussion. We threw welfare at you and all these entitlement programs and reverse discrimination and everything you want to think about, but we haven't helped you. We further encumber you in your growth. This is simple. We need to get into these communities, saturate them with money and bodies. And we're going to continue that conversation next week if we have time, although I remind you, Elliot Ackerman will be on next week. And you can listen to my show, by the way, Monday and Tuesdays on WBOB from 5 to 6 live at 600 AM, 101.1 FM. I want to thank everyone for listening today, and I continue to, ask you to become part of this conversation. Thank you so much, guys. See you next week.